All right. Thank you so much for being here on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. It shows real devotion, so we really thank you for being here. So my name is Thomas Duurland. I work for an organization called IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. And today we're really excited to talk with you about a new market mechanism that IDH, together with its partners, has been working on, which is called verified sourcing areas. And we really want to discuss this with you. So we'll have two great speakers introduce a bit of background first, and I will invite them to stage later. But then for the remaining of the session, we really want to go into smaller breakout group discussions to think through what this new mechanism could mean for different stakeholder groups. So before we get into that, we want to show you a short video.
Currently, no efficient and inexpensive option exists to guarantee supply of commodities that fulfill global sustainability commitments of companies. IDH and partners are developing a new responsible sourcing mechanism, Verified Sourcing Areas, or VSAs. VSAs make it possible to verify the sustainability of major agricultural commodities at the level of an entire district or province, rather than for each producer individually. In the producing region, local stakeholders agree on sustainability targets, governance and monitoring, and work together to achieve these, a compact. Included is the Global VSA Performance Standard to monitor progress on 5 key themes of global concern: forest and peat protection, good governance, labour, land tenure and transparency. The performance standard will be finalized after public consultation. Through a direct and transparent supply chain, committed end buyers can get a better understanding of the products in their supply chain and improve sustainability with direct support for the producing region. VSAs therefore serve 2 goals: guarantee supply of sustainable commodities at scale and sustainable development by local actors.
Good. So now to further elaborate on what you just saw in the video, I would like to invite 2 speakers on stage. So the first one is my colleague Willem Claessens. He's a senior commodity trade specialist at IDH. So Willem, if you could just come on stage. And our second speaker of today is Geeta Sharani. Geeta is the executive director of the Secretariat of LTKL, so it's the Membership Association of Districts in Indonesia. So Geeta, if you could please come on stage. Thanks. So first, I would like to invite Willem to talk a little bit more about the verified sourcing area model and what this is all about and the 3 different components that it consists of.
This is my mic?
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for getting up so early to have this discussion with us. We appreciate that a lot. We're going to talk about verified sourcing areas today. And verified sourcing areas are, to us, are an area-based model that makes sure that there is enough supply of sustainable commodities around the world. And yes, through VSAs, we can connect producing regions to global markets. And we can help local actors to get in touch with global markets and drive sustainability all by themselves and get rewarded by the global markets for doing so. VSAs basically connect commitments of global markets to sustainability goals on the ground. So today, we don't have a mechanism that does a few things. We don't have a mechanism that encompasses everything, that makes sure that we do sustainability on a larger scale. Yes, we have certification, but that doesn't tick all the boxes that we need. Yeah, and also we have not a system that targets multiple commodities, which is also, to my point of view, an issue. And yes, we have no way of producing sustainable commodities at a scale that is needed in this world. So that's why we have come up with the verified sourcing area model. And this model we would like to explain to you in a very brief sentence, and then think with you through what a verified sourcing area should be doing. So, the verified sourcing area has basically 3 pillars. One is a global agreement between multiple stakeholders, a local agreement between multiple stakeholders, which is on the ground, which is between governments, between companies, and between social and sustainability stakeholders. So we have on the other end buyers, committed end buyers, companies that have made commitments to the markets, to themselves, to their consumers. And in the middle, we have a transparent supply chain. So these 3 things together make up a verified sourcing area. They are connected. This system suddenly makes sustainability in local areas, in jurisdictions, a business model. And I will explain why. Because since it is a business model, people like it. And we've spoken to many people around the world, and we're working actively in all sorts of jurisdictions. And suddenly, people see that with sustainability you can make money. And that is obviously a concept that everybody understands. So what is a compact? A compact is an agreement between social stakeholders, between local government and companies. It basically says a few things about sustainability in a jurisdiction. But how do we make sure that these sustainability goals that this compact has are being communicated to the outer world? How do we make that sure? So we've come up with a global performance standard for VSAs. And we have said to local actors, if you put 5 things that are very high on the mind of committed end buyers in your goals for sustainability, you will become a more attractive region to source from. And those 5 we put in this global performance standard. But we said also, as we realize that every jurisdiction in the world is different, you can't compare Mato Grosso in Brazil to Aceh in Indonesia. We also need a few local things that are really high on your mind. So a compact is a set of goals whereby a local community agrees on sustainability and sets to those goals an active plan to reach those goals. And suddenly, you have something that you can show to the world. In order to be committed as an end buyer, you need to know actually where you source from. So if you don't know where the product that is in your supply chain comes from, if you don't know what it is, who produced it, then it's not that of an interesting product. Because you can't do anything about it. You can't make sure that your commitments are being met if you don't know what's happening. So a transparent supply chain is very, very important in this model. And that's what end buyers like. Because suddenly, they see where the product comes from. They say, oh, this jurisdiction is doing this, 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 and this. And oh, by the way, including in all these goals of the jurisdiction, are 5 things that are very high on our mind. And that's the global performance standard. And what is this global performance standard? It looks at forest protection. It looks at land tenure. It looks at governance, obviously. It looks at labor. And it looks at transparency. So these 5 issues are very high on the minds of global companies, the global markets. Those are mostly embedded in their commitments. So again, what we say is, if in your compact you can address these 5 issues, you will be attractive to a whole host of companies. So with that in mind, suddenly a mayor of a jurisdiction or a governor of a state can go and say to global buyers, look at my jurisdiction. See how well we are doing on these 5 things that are high on your mind. See the progress that we're making, because we will be verifying that progress. And how do we do that? For many things, it is already possible. We will rely a lot on local government, because otherwise things are not sustainable. If everybody pulls out, local government is still there. So they need to make sure that this is something that works. So we believe that with this system, with this business model for sustainability, we can take huge steps whereby we don't have the same problems as we have now. That we have, for example, certified farms, but in between the trees are falling. That we have certified farms, but some can't join the certification. In a jurisdiction, everybody can join. Everybody is in there. Everybody's in that jurisdiction. And it's everybody's responsibility. And not only that, now, because it's a business model, everybody's interested. So I would leave it like that for now. Am I going to explain what they have to do now? Or? Yeah, I thought, yeah. Okay. No, it's good. So we're going to ask your help, basically. And Thomas will explain you what we're going to do, but we're going to ask your help to think about a few of the things that we just mentioned. Please.
Thank you, Willem. Yeah, so before we go into our breakout group discussions and we ask you and we invite you to further think about what Willem has just talked about, I would like to invite Gita on stage. So when Willem was talking about verified sourcing areas, he also mentioned the role of local government and the vital importance of local government in setting up this compact and in helping a jurisdiction to become more sustainable. So I would like to invite Gita on stage and share a bit the work that she is doing in Indonesia and talk a bit about the role of government and why verified sourcing areas are interesting to her as well, and the potential benefits that it could bring. So welcome, Gita, and we're so happy that you could join us. And,
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak dan Ibu. Selamat pagi, as we say it in Indonesia. My name is Gita Syahrani. I'm the head of the Secretariat for Sustainable District Association, or in Indonesia, we call it Lingkar Temu Kabupaten Lestari, or LTKL. It literally means the circle to meet to discuss sustainability. It sparked from, the initiative itself sparked from 2 districts in Indonesia. One is in West Kalimantan called Sintang, and another one in Musi Banyu Asin in South Sumatra. Just to give you some context, Sintang has more than 60% of forest cover left. So it's quite significant. And in Musi Banyu Asin, majority of their land are already converted into production. Most of them are rubber, but now it's growing on palm oil also. So these 2 polar opposites are being exposed to expectations in terms of actually greening their commodity supply chain, both for palm oil and also for rubber, but also other commodities like coffee and cacao. Why they came together and formed this initiative was because they realized, so in Indonesia, the government level goes national, province, and district. And for plantation, specifically on commodities production, all of the mandate still lies with the district government, while for forest protection, the mandate goes in between, either provincial level or national level. So they realize if they are committed to green their commodity supply chain, they cannot do it solely on the basis of their mandate. It has to go through the blessing of the provincial government and also to the national government. So if they go one by one, the voice is not strong enough. So they do it as a collective movement. That's why they established this association. They capped the membership to maximum 10, because they do want to keep it as a working team instead of just a meetup. But it is housed under the National District Association in Indonesia that house more than 514 in total we have all over Indonesia with different portfolio. So the reason why we're interested in becoming part of the committee for VSA is also the notion that sustainability in Indonesia are still seen as a burden. particularly from the district level government. If they're trying to promote green vision or sustainable vision, this is not something that is automatically understood, especially by their constituent, the one that are voting them. And we're talking about politically elected leaders, so it's quite important to actually send the message across that you're actually taking care of the people. Now, right now, what we're trying to do as a secretariat is actually to streamline different types of expectation for sustainable jurisdictions, just to first identify what are the opportunities out there for jurisdictions that really want to commit and want to move forward in transforming their commodity supply chain or their overall planning. From that exercise, we found that a lot of the time, there are opportunities, but it's not something that is tangible enough. For example, if you look at jurisdictional certification or if you look at climate financing, this is something that still looks at jurisdiction as a project-by-project basis, so to speak. And it's not something that is clear what is expected of a jurisdiction in order to tap into that opportunities. And we're quite encouraged, actually, because there are a lot of rating tools, there are a lot of different groups that trying to define all of this enabling condition that's expected from the jurisdictions, one of them being the VSA. But the hope is actually to get to a point where a district government, when they said that they want to pursue a sustainable vision, it's clear what are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points that are expected of them. And the initial approach that VSA was offering points to that direction. It is pointing to how government can take ownership of the concept, and it's not left behind as an actor that are just there to sign off after everything was done by the partners or by the private sector. So through this exercise, of course, it's a work in progress also in our end, because not only that, so the five criteria that we found out, talking to the district government, talking to different partners, talking to different circles, including in the VSA discussion, there are at least 5 enabling conditions that are said, which would differentiate a serious jurisdictions compared to the not so serious jurisdiction. One is the fact that they are willing to integrate a lot of their vision into their planning document. Number 2 is whether they're actually willing to integrate it as a regulatory framework. Number 3, if they're able to collect locally sourced data and able to develop a monitoring system based on their own data. Number 4 is if they are able to actually convene and do a facilitating role for a multi-stakeholders collaboration. And number 5, if they are able to actually communicate what they want in a clear, synthesized, and easy to understand manner. So these are the 5 things that we, as a secretariat, have sort of summarized. And now the reason why we're involved in different initiatives, including the VSA, is trying to test out whether those 5 assumptions are correct, whether this is something that is fitting to all of the expectations. So the 3 main questions that we wanted to ask the investment community through the help of the VSA network are number 1, what is the key questions that investment or market, in the sense, want to ask a jurisdiction when they do a go or no-go investment decision making. Number 2 is what are the basic information that you require of a jurisdiction before you want to do a sustainable investment decision. And number 3, what are the credible data source in investment or market opinion can a jurisdiction rely from? So that's the hope is, through working with the VSA and through working with all of you, we're able to answer that question quite clearly, and we're able to go back to our members and say, if you do things like this, at least this is a step forward to lure in more concrete sustainable investment into your jurisdictions. I guess that's in a nutshell. Thanks.
Thank you, Gita, for that. So now to continue, we want to involve you in this discussion. So on your table, you will find 2 things. So the first is a stakeholder group. And what we want you to do today is to think from the perspective of that stakeholder group. So maybe you're not a financer or you're not a producer, but we would still like to ask you, what if you were? How would you look at the verified sourcing areas, and what does it need to be for it to work for you as that stakeholder? So on your table, you will also find a list of questions. And what we would like to ask you for the next 30 minutes or so is, within your group, have a look at those questions and discuss them amongst yourself, and try to come up with 3 actionable ideas to help bring this VSA, this concept forward. You can just write on the back of one of those pages. So my colleague Nienke Sleuring there in the corner and myself will also walk around, and we will try to engage with you in discussion. So please also do ask us any questions that you may have. And then after 30 minutes or so, we will go back to our plenary discussion, and we'll ask some of you to tell about your findings. So what did you talk about, and maybe highlight some of those actionable ideas that you came up with. So please, if you're at a table that doesn't yet have one of these instructions on it yet, then you can join one of the other groups. I think we'll also make another breakout group on the table all the way over there. And if you're on this table, you're lucky you get to choose which stakeholder group you want to represent. So please, have a look at those questions, and we'll be walking around. Thank you. Yeah, you can go around.
All right, if everybody could wrap up, then I'm going to ask every group what your main questions were, what the main issues are, and we can have a discussion. Let me see, I'm just going to pick a random group and ask if somebody could report back on what your main questions are, and then we'll see if there are any other issues related to that from the other groups. So let's see, is this civil society? The civil society group looks about ready to report back. Do we have an extra microphone? Yeah. Who is going to report? I think this is on.
All right, so we were the civil society and consumers' perspective when we went on several tangents, but I think what we all agreed. So to the first point, our question was, how can these verified sourcing areas add value to civil society and consumers? And one actionable idea we had is that the area is really what's unique and sets VSAs apart from other certification schemes. So having that area follow through the supply chain, whether it's a visual or a QR coded link so that the end user and the civil society groups know what area they're sort of supporting and is benefiting. Towards the second point, what's important in the design of the VSA model to make it work for civil society and consumers? One idea we had is that transparency may require advanced technology, such as blockchain, that it needs to ensure health of both the producers in the area, but also the end consumer. So that focus on health is important in the design. And what kind of action may we require from other groups? Our question was, do the VSAs include regulatory requirements? So who are the administrators and who are the auditors? And so that may be where civil society and consumers require additional information and interfacing with other stakeholder groups. Anything else to add? Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
very clear. So something that came back in a lot in the group that I was participating in as well, here with the farmers and the processors, right? The traders, is what are the benefits to the traders, to the farmers, to the region? Anybody from this group that would like to expand a little bit on that question? And please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm Tim Raden. I work for the Wildlife Conservation Society, so definitely not a commodity trading organisation. But we did a good job of standing in for those types of organisations and trying to think from their perspectives. We spent a lot of time discussing the different types of trader that you find in a landscape. Those that have taken a leadership role, have gone for full certification, have gone for traceability to farm level and so on, and feel that they are well advanced on the sustainability agenda, versus those that haven't made such progress to date and would probably see the VSA approach as a low-cost, easy access route to sustainability credentials without having invested up front in any of the other certification processes. So there's clearly a trade-off there, and one that presents a bit of a risk, because by participating in a VSA approach, the leader type companies will essentially lose ground. They'll lose the leadership position. They'll lose the credibility. The freeloading companies will gain credibility, and everyone will arrive at a sort of medium level of credibility in the middle. There's another, that led us on to a discussion about entry-level requirements, and since there are clearly risks in a lot of these jurisdictions, and in fact, if we wanted this VSA approach to be meaningful, it would have to be targeted at forest frontier areas where there is a deforestation risk, and therefore you could have some impact. In those high-risk jurisdictions, there's a high risk that the thing could be derailed by continued deforestation and so on. So by participating in this VSA approach, you're also opening yourself up to additional risk, because where before, if you're a responsible company, you had full traceability to zero deforestation sources, now any deforestation in that jurisdiction would undermine your brand value. So there's a lot more to say, but I think I'll stop there, because that was the main gist of our discussion about the sort of additional value and additional risks associated with participating in VSA.
Thank you. So a lot of it comes down to how do we prevent and how do we work on free riding? How can we ensure the continuous improvement? How do we make sure the benefit actually reaches those that need it? And maybe I was wondering if anybody from the government group would like to respond to the issue of the free riding. Based on the compact, that I think the government has an important role to play in a verified sourcing area. Is that something that you discussed? I'm just going to hand the microphone to somebody.
Well, no, I just... actually, we ended our discussion on an important question, which is actually not exactly the same, but might be related, which is actually who's paying for that? If it comes at an additional price compared to business as usual, who's going to pay for that? And we were discussing examples where, I mean, basically the market so far has failed to internalize this type of cost, like certification, etc. So if you want to make a change, like, you need to find instruments to internalize this cost of VSA. And we discussed, for example, on the government side, there's quite a lot that needs to be done in terms of, monitoring capacities, in terms of land clarification and planning and land use planning and all the things. But so how do you pay for that? And well, there is no. I mean, we were just basically in the discussion, but I think there are real question on what policies can support this type of instruments. To basically, it's not only policies like who's monitor, who has produced what data and has access to what data, etc., but policies about how do you share the cost of this system. And how do you internalize this cost mainly into the market chain? And so we just basically left it at a discussion level. So I don't know if there are more ideas from the colleagues there, and maybe get to the like few key points that we've been discussing before.
No, it's okay. Somebody else.
All right, so then the quick question is who's paying, right? Over to the financiers. We're talking about a market mechanism that we hope to scale up. How has this discussion been here?
Yes, so the financier will not pay. That's an easy answer. Because we looked at, who are the financiers, and obviously there's a multiplicity of investors, donors. We took the perspective of investors, impact investors, social investors, injecting money into recipients that would be companies or cooperative of producers. And so the discussion went on and on. If we're trying to wrap up, and please, help me add up, the main added value of the VSA as we understand it, although there's not much disclosed, is the transparency element, because that would help, trace, the sourcing areas, disclose as well, which is, very often missing in some of the supply chains. So the transparency element of the VSA, I think, were quite central for us. To answer the second and the third question, and very linked to the transparency, that would be the verification liability as well. And so obviously the third party that all your groups mention is key. It has to be an independent third party auditor of some kind. So that brings back the question to other standards and how VSA would align with other standards. But together with the verification and the third party is the governance structure of the landscape as a whole. So is there a landscape plan? Is there a landscape strategy? Is this, structure and multi-stakeholder approach inclusive, really hearing what the farmers' needs are, not only just providing services based on assumptions, but, hearing from more vulnerable groups and understanding, what the social impacts could also be. And then from other stakeholders, providing access to markets, providing those extension services that we mentioned, are all things that financiers usually overlook, but are very important nowadays, because that would just secure the investment in the long run. So we started, the discussion from a risk perspective, and then just, open up the discussion to something a bit more inclusive, but without knowing exactly where the scope and the responsibility of the financier should stop. Is there anything you want to add? Yeah.
Thank you, very clear. I think on the verified sourcing areas, the new element that we're adding here in this market mechanism is to make sure that it is indeed inclusive by the development of these compacts, which are basically sustainability agreements with all the local stakeholders, right? So including the farmers, the big companies, the farmer associations, the local governments especially, but also indigenous groups and other social groups. So you develop these targets together. These are the people that live in these regions, that buy from these regions. They know what the issues are and where they would like to work on. So really making sure that it is indeed a bottom-up approach. And now moving to the final table, to the farmers and the processors. Anybody that would like to report back here?
Joanna Montesinos from ONF International. So we have been discussing a lot also this question of inclusion of the farmers and how to make sure that they are actually benefiting from this certification, from this standard. So what is the added value of the standard, of what kind of value VSA could bring to farmers and processors? So first, the question of processor was not very clear. So what is a processor? Is it the first step of the process, and is it the more the further development of the value chain? What is this? So. But we were quite agree on adding some value for farmers was very important, and by consistent offtake, on price premium, and negotiation power, and visibility on ownership. So that was the main point. And what is important in the design of VSA, we came back on this question of stakeholder engagement on how much we should implement peer-to-peer pressure to have this good practices implemented. How can we avoid conflicts, and how can we make sure that all the farmers will benefit from this? So one answer was making the government responsible and not one group of stakeholders on the ground, but that has the barrier of the corruption and of having a good government in place. And there was also a concern about the recognition of already good practices existing on the ground. So yeah, I think that was more or less what I'm taking from the discussion. And do you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to actually make a comment on what the colleague said on the other table that I thought was very interesting about the possibility of a VSA in a jurisdiction where there are other companies already certified, being able to cause a reputational risk for these companies and maybe, not generate the impact that you wish. This is something I think that should be empirically tested. So I think this is something that you should look into more deeply, and might point out to suggestions that VSAs should start actually in areas where you don't have a lot of companies certified. Maybe not in Mato Grosso, but in other areas where you have a big commodity trading, but also high levels of deforestation and other natural resources problems, but where you don't have a lot of companies certified. There might be a more impact there than otherwise. I don't know, but I thought that was an interesting question. Just on our group, there was a lot of discussion also in what would require for this verification system to work, and also in terms of the stakeholder engagement and the equitable sharing of benefits. There's been some discussion in terms of the investments that are brought to the landscape by these investors like Carrefour and whatnot. But I think someone pointed out that it's very important to, like Gita also, to bring their government in. And in my experience, this is personally speaking, I think it would be quite important that part of the resources also flow to the government. You can establish systems where this distribution is equitable. Maybe it's a slight share, but if you don't have that, in most places, probably it's not going to work.
Thank you. Very clear. I think that's a very interesting suggestion you made about how can we work in regions that need it most, and where then would you start? To close off, we have more or less, a little bit less, let's say 5 minutes. I'd like to see if there are any questions in the room that we could answer now. And then before we do that, we do have a Slido question. If we could put that slide up. Because obviously we won't be able to answer all your questions now, but we would really like to get back to you on these questions and publish them on our website, www.verifiedsourcingareas.org, where we will put up a Q&A and see how we can address all of your concerns and questions, because obviously we are here to learn and very much value your input. So if you could just put up your key questions here, and we will get back to some of them now and most of them probably later. Thank you.
Yes, I should introduce myself because I forgot to do so before. My name is Raphael. I'm working for the Landscape Finance Lab at WWF. So the key question for me is really, where is the business case? Because Willem, you started from this angle, and maybe we should have started from this angle as well, from the financier perspective. But how do you build that business case? Because from those more entry-level landscapes or jurisdictions or districts, the business case is not that obvious. So you'll have to spend time in that compact just to show it. And so you went very quickly, I understand, through the presentation, but I think this is the starting point, really, how to demonstrate the business case.
Okay, but let me first take one thing up that I found by talking to a lot of you by now, is the VSA model is not the same as the global performance standard. The model is the compact, the transparent supply chain, and the committed end buyer. And the global performance standard, the VSA global performance standard, is a means for the local compact to show what they are doing on sustainability on 5 issues that are close to the hearts of many in the markets. So this is 2 completely separate things. Don't mix them up, please. So then the business case. Where does the business case come from? The business case comes from if you have your goals, which may be 10 or 20 or 100 in a compact, of which 5 are the global ones, and the rest is local ones that are important, you are improving the sustainability of your jurisdiction altogether. Not one, not only government, not only companies, not only pharma organizations, indigenous people. No, everyone together. You improve the sustainability of your jurisdiction. And that, because you've included these 5 things, becomes very attractive to companies around the world who need to get to their commitments. So, where are they going? To somewhere that the jurisdiction can show what they're doing over time and how they progress in sustainability, or do they go somewhere where they have no clue what's happening? Where are the companies going to put in their money? In the jurisdiction that shows that they have an action plan towards certain goals, of which 5, the global performance standard for VSAs, are high on their minds? Or do they go to somewhere where that's not the case? So I think that the business case for VSAs is that you make yourself very much attractive by doing all these things. And there comes in the money, because you will have more buyers flowing to you. You will maybe have ultimately a product that is a better sustainable product. That is where the business case comes in. And a lot of people locally have seen that already, and they've come to us. Mayors are coming to us and say, how are we going to do this for our jurisdiction? But also farmers like it, because suddenly they see that somebody on the other side of the world cares about what they do in sustainability. It doesn't become their burden. They do it for someone. And in return, we've asked the end buyers to divert some of their sustainability money to that specific compact that they're buying from. So it is a mutual benefit. Rather than putting money into sustainability and don't know what's happening to it, you now can actively support the goals of a compact and see what's happening in that compact, because that is what the verification does. It shows the progress that is being made over time on these 5 sustainability issues and all the local stuff that have been put in.
Thanks, Willem.
Does it satisfy your answer a bit? Okay, we'll have a longer discussion on that outside of this.
Are there any other questions or comments, or anybody would like to respond to this? If you could shortly introduce yourself.
I'm Florence also from NF International. It's more about a thought, and we start discussing about that, and it's related to business case, it's related about, who is paying, who is administrating, but also who is paying for that. And we enter in a discussion about the premium, and then there was some comments about how the certifications at the end, you don't have a premium, you have access to market only. I think today, what we can see in many of these certifications is that at the end, many businesses are dying because nobody's paying for that premium, and someone has to pay for the whole process. So I think it's an interesting moment today, generally speaking, to kind of rethink maybe the business case and these models of certification, because honestly, what is happening today is that the premium is not there, except the only one I still see in the market that the premium is there is the organic one that is exploding, the market is still growing, etc. Others, not. So, and what I see also, still, it may progress with all the commitments in terms of for deforestation, but today, some territories, okay, I could have access to a more compelling market, for example, EU, but I can still export to China or India my whole production. So this is, I'm not sure. In terms of access to market, is still the business is there really. So it's more about, rethinking all this, maybe discussing about this certification models and the market as it is today.
Okay, well that comes back again to the question, where's the money? Huh? And yes, you're right, the money is not in premiums. They don't exist, it is myth. It doesn't exist now, it will not exist under the VSA. And what I tell farmers all the time is, in order to become legal, up to legal level, you should not expect a premium, because that is the normal thing to do. Once you go beyond, then if you're lucky and do the right thing, then you can start demanding a premium. So, how do you do that? By showing what you're doing on sustainability. So by increasing your production, by using the right products on your land, by rotating crops. That is where the money is. It's not in the premium. However, if you're really, really successful in this scheme and show on the 5 themes that you've done extremely well, you've exceeded your 5-year targets, you've done it all in 3 years. I'm not sure whether that's possible, but if you can do that, then maybe you can get a premium. But that is a market mechanism. We can't say that it works. That is not the first line of money that's coming in. So the farmer, and that was the question what we're doing, they need to rely on their additional production. They need to rely on the fact that their product suddenly comes from a region, from a jurisdiction that is very, very, very attractive. Yeah? More questions?
Thank you. I think we have a comment or a question here.
I just wondered when you're planning to publish the global performance standard.
Yeah, the planning is that we launch this for consultation in July 2019.
We are already a little bit over time, so I would think I'd like to close and also really encourage you to send in your questions so that we can further build the concept. We'll be around for the rest of today, so any questions, comments, discussions you would like to have, please feel free. And let's continue the discussion. Thanks for coming in on Sunday morning.